Okay, ladies and jelly beans, welcome back to the pod. Trigger warning, we're gonna get right into it today. So, we are on part, I think this is 4 of my life story. I seem to have condensed them quite a bit. So this phase of my life, I was doing my thing, doing my music, but I was dating around, looking in all the wrong places. I was dating guys that were like hot and young and tatted, and we're seeing a pattern here. And I just kept getting heartbroken, right? Just guys that you would expect to do things, and then I'm shocked when they actually do them. I remember one particular guy, I drove to Santa Barbara for him, and we had a great night, and then he was supposed to be there for like longer than a day, and I drove there again the next day, and he like ghosted me. And I was like, what? And then the years later, he tried to be like, oh, you hurt me. And I'm like, what are you talking about? Like, I was having a hard time with men in this generation. But the reality is, it's not just men, it's just people, and it's dating in this generation. It is so difficult. But it's a lot more difficult when you choose to continue perpetuating this habit of choosing guys that have these red flags. And it's like that song, Red Flag, or whatever, where it's like I kept just choosing the wrong ones over and over and expecting different results, which is literally, by the way, the definition of insanity, right? So here I am just making myself insane. And because of my music, I was meeting up and hanging out with like YouTubers and this and that. And I had this one YouTuber in one of my music videos. And long story short, ended up meeting a guy through a friend of a friend, right? Older guy, all tatted up. Didn't think anything of it at the time when I met him. I was at lunch with one friend, and he came in and out and I was like, what's going on with you? Because he kept going back out to his car. Anyways, long story short, weeks later after I had met him initially, I was having a day. Something relatively traumatic had happened the night before, but not the point, with one of the stupid young boys. And I was just sitting in my car at the grocery store, of all places. And I was sitting there for an unreasonable amount of time, just decompressing and thinking about life and my decisions and this cycle. And he rolls up on his Ducati behind me, like, knight in shining armor, watch out, right? And I'm like, why is this guy stopped behind my car? And I realized it's that guy that I had met. And we just start talking, and we are talking and talking in this parking lot. Eventually we go to a lookout point and we're talking for hours. And he gives me the whole spiel, right? The celibate, the sobriety, the I'm just on this track of life, his whole life story. He told me just about all this trauma and stuff that he had been through, but he was like doing really well now and on this life mission. Like, he had been acquitted for murder, okay? Acquitted for murder, and now he's like trying to save children's lives and this whole thing. And don't get me wrong, there is a lot of truth to that, right? But like, this man was in no place to be dating anyone, and he knew that, right? But anyways, I go along my merry way, and then I'm driving back, actually from getting stood up in Santa Barbara, and I'm just like, I've had enough with these dudes, with these young, stupid dudes. And he calls me up and he's like, where are you at? And I was literally on my way back, passing through where he was. And so we started hanging out, and before you know it, the rest is history. We're attached at the hip. Now, keep in mind, this man is like 16 years older than me, okay? So just different than everything that I was dealing with and putting up with. Like, I was like, this guy's older, he has his life together, this and that, or so I thought. So at one point, I went to a party. I went to a party for like my friend's mom's party, thing like crazy. And he didn't want to come. And it turns out he was so upset that I was at this party where there was alcohol, and he couldn't be there because he didn't drink and he didn't want to be around alcohol. So he went and drank. So from there was this downward spiral where I just met an entire different version of him. It got abusive. It got dark. There was one point where we were staying at his friend's house, and he started screaming at me, and I had had enough. So I ran, and I knew that there was like only one small opportunity, like he was in the shower or something. So I ran barefoot. I just split. He comes running after me. So maybe he wasn't in the shower. Fully clothed. Comes running after me. And I hid under a car. I hid under a car from the man that I thought was supposed to be protecting me. Here I am in this situation being like, what happened? 2 seconds ago, you were telling me all these things about how you're this good Christian man and you're sober and all this. And the moment the alcohol hit, it was like, boom, he was drinking at 7 o'clock in the morning. And I introduced me to an entire different version of him. And there was jealousy and there was anger and there was all of this, but I was already too deep in it. So here I am just in this whirlwind, right? Starting to pick up these habits of like lying about things to the world and pretending it was okay and telling everyone like, no, we're good, he's good, everything's good, because I didn't want to admit that it was not good. One night, he went off because he would like break up with me and come back and this and that, and you would say like, oh, well, let him go. Well, it's not that simple. When you're in this, you're so deep in it. And when someone is telling you you are not the person that you are because of their trauma, not allowing them to believe that you are, everything in you lights up in this fire of like, why wouldn't you believe this? And instead of separating their thoughts and their trauma from your real existence, it becomes, if you're not in a strong enough mental space, you start wanting to prove to them that you are real and that not to listen to their trauma. But this was the second or third time I had to realize you cannot make someone believe what they are not ready to believe. You cannot make someone progress and learn and heal if they are not ready to. Doesn't matter how hard you try or how much you try to prove it. So one night I had driven after him. I went looking for him. And I was so out of sorts that I got pulled over for drunk driving. Sober. I was sober. Sober as an ox, as they say. Pulled over, and the cop looks at me and he's like, you should take some time, chill, just don't drive for a little bit because you're clearly not good, right? So some time goes on and I'm still doing appearances for MTV. I'm going out to like clubs or whatever, and they're getting tables for like MTV people and still hanging out with that whole kind of crowd. And I get invited to this one, and I'm like, I want to still be like active and a part of this community, if you will. And so I was like, can we go? Of course, I didn't want to go alone. I was not about that. I wanted him to come with me. So I invited one of his friends that we had met because he wanted a haircut one day. And we met his friend who was a hairdresser. And I had reached out to him on Instagram and said, will you come with us? Because I felt like, and I brought a girlfriend for him, I felt like it would calm him down. It would help him out having a friend there. He wouldn't be so like obsessed of what I'm doing and who I'm talking to. So we get there and we're late. We're like fantastically late. And you're supposed to go at clubs. You're supposed to be there at a certain time to get in, blah, blah, blah. So I'm like, let me just go in and then we'll get you guys in. Let the girls go in first. Club culture, gross. Anyways, we go ahead to do that. Well, he wasn't too much of a fan of that, right? So somehow he got in, comes behind me, grabs me by my neck, throws me down on the club floor in front of a bouncer. I very specifically remember a bouncer being right there. Like, are you going to do anything about this, bro? But no, he did not. A friend, however, came to my rescue, pulled him outside. He kept calling me. He'd come outside. He'd be like, baby, I'm so sorry. I'm so sorry. And then he would go for me again. And his friend would grab him back. Like, it was just this wild, like, I hate you. I love you. I hate you. I love you. And I just couldn't take it. So I went back into the club and was like, I'm not dealing with this right now. Finally, we leave and he screams at me all the way home. All the way home. Oh, man, we are just going through months of my life. So at some point on this escapade, I finally was like, I need to clean my life up. I need to figure some things up. He had convinced me I was an alcoholic. Isn't that great? So I started doing AA. I stopped drinking for like 6 months. I was going to AA I remember going to AA and them being like, talking about all these issues that I just didn't have. Like, I was just a normal kid drinking. I wasn't over drinking. I wasn't waking up drinking. I didn't not know how to function without drinking. But I met someone when I was at AA, and he became my best friend. And he and I were like traveling together and just developed this safe friendship. And it was something that was one of the most beautiful phases of my life. And he lived on the East Coast right by my best friend. So I would go over there, fly over there and see her and see him. And we co-produced a show, a play off of MTV, and we filmed a music video and was just having the time of my life. And I was so scared to lose him that I never crossed that line and went romantically with him. I always stayed in the friend zone because I was just so scared of losing him in my life. And looking back on it, I'm really glad that I made that choice. He's happily married now and we're still friends. But I also feel so foolish because I went back to the abusive guy at some point. I don't remember at what point it was, but I finally ended up going back to that abusive guy. And for what reason? I guess I just didn't take the time to fully heal. And there is no correct process. There is no way. You don't know when you're fully out of the woods, right? And anything can happen. One phone call. I think that's what happened. I actually remember at one point I was back in Malibu and he calls me and he's like, "Can I see you?" He pulls up in this Escalade and is like, "Do you want to hit me with the truck? I'm so sorry. I love you, baby," you know. And it just got swept right off my feet, right back into the chaos. And within a certain amount of time, I remember he's breaking up with me and getting back together and breaking up with me. And one night he broke up with me. And I was so over it. I was like, okay, he broke up with me again. Here I'm putting up with all this and he keeps breaking up with me. And I call my girlfriend who was single at the time, and she had like some young guys that she wanted me to meet or whatever. And so I go call the boys and I drive over to her and I proceed to just sit there in a car and cry with her for hours about how much I love this guy. We didn't see any boys. We just like got Starbucks and I sat in the car and cried. And she goes, "Go to him. Like, I can tell that you love him. Go back and like fight for him." So I go back and he's staying in a hotel and I go to his hotel. And for whatever reason, probably something he normally did, I don't remember, it was so long ago, he takes my phone and he goes through my phone and he sees the text that says, "Call the boys." And now this is why I say, and I encourage people not to look through your partner's phone, because you never know the context. You never know the context of what you can find in someone's phone. And if you do end up finding something, you should always bring it to your partner and give them space to be like, "This is what happened. This is why I said that. This is what that actually means." And I found in healthy relationships that it's very productive and you end up being like, "Oh, okay, I understand now." So he didn't do that though. He jumped right to conclusions, hand up, smacked me across the face, pushed me down, ripped my clothes off. I ran for my life, obviously, and I just couldn't believe it. I was just in such shock. And looking back, that still wasn't enough for me. I still went back. But I was so shooken by it. I want to say it was a turning point for me. But at that point, like, the physical slap wasn't even the darkest part. It was the words. It was the trauma. I was so in survival mode that I don't think I even really processed what had happened. I definitely ran, but he ran after me. I think it was days before I let him back in, but somehow, of course, let him back in. And it wasn't until, I want to say, a couple months later, I went and saw him. And we were pretty done by that point because it had just gotten so bad, obviously. I went and saw him one last time and we were talking and he got angry again and he spat in my face. And after all of that, it was the disrespect that I finally was like, I'm done. And I remember just wailing on him like a little rag doll where it's doing nothing because I'm like 5 foot, 100 pounds, doing nothing here. But I remember driving away crying and realizing I was finally done. And that roller coaster, though, it implanted so much trauma in me that I didn't even notice was happening at the time because I was just surviving. I was just getting through another day. I was just obsessed with trying to prove something, trying to get him to see that I loved him. I didn't understand why he wouldn't believe me when I'm putting up with all of this. Why? But the reality is, and this is, again, not even the last time I had to learn that people will not believe what you try to get them to believe. They will believe what they want to believe until they are ready. Thank you for listening. I'm sorry if this triggered anyone. If you are going through trauma or abuse, I am going to put the abuse line in the bio here. Contact me, contact a friend, reach out, get help. We love you. We are not going to judge you. Your friends aren't going to go anywhere. We just want you happy. And there is a way to get out. It does get better. There is a light at the end of the tunnel. Thank you for listening.